Well, with those two very stimulating talks and the comment, I open the floor, and I'm waiting for questions, testimonies, reports, memoirs, critique. Yes, over there, sir. There's a microphone coming in your direction, slowly but surely. Yeah.
The success of Matzpen is a secularization of Jewish history, messianism, and future hope. Thus, it grabs, in a sense, it controls the secular and the rational in our society, but also a conflict with the idea of hope for the future, because what you're saying is the future isn't here, and perhaps can't get there. In theory, this type of secularization is really something that could be replayed, and this is what I think Madame said in the last sentence of her report. Every few decades, we could have another movement of Matzpen because secularization can roll through, just as it did in the last 150 years in Jewish history, roll again.
Would you like to take care of it?
I'm not very sure whether what to answer on this because it was rather more commentary. What I would agree is that it is obvious that there could be every generation a new Matzpen, because also all the questions Matzpen dealt with are still there, and because there's also
the questions haven't been answered.
Celia would like to say something on this.
Yeah, I think in the problem of new protest movements, they are less generational problems. It's the problem of the proclaimed death of utopian thinking, as I said, because in sociological theory or theories on social movements, it's said that in order to get into movement and to protest, you have to believe that you can change history and that you can do something. And at least since the 1970s, this idea has been completely destroyed for several reasons. And it's still being destroyed by the evaluation of current protest movements as something that doesn't lead to any alternative. So I think it's less a generational problem than a problem of a change in perception of time.
I want to add something before I ask the next question, that it may be that secularization recurs, but the historical roots and flavor of each secularization is something different. And so when you have to look at different secularizations, you have to ask, in what were they rooted and what were they reacting to in order to evaluate them properly? Now here I think the contribution that Lutz made was in showing how Matzpen did not derive its ideology from the Holocaust. And because it did not derive its ideology from the Holocaust, it was close to a certain kind of French thinking about these things from which it derived, which it was closer, but it's not a derivative movement. It has to be seen within the context, as he pointed out, of secular Hebrew nationalism. So secular Hebrew nationalism, so it's a two-way movement. On the one hand, secular Hebrew nationalism, and then a rejection of that without accepting the diaspora. So it's a rejection of the Zionist rejection of diaspora, but it wants to go on into becoming part of the Middle East. You don't agree?
No, I agree, but I would like to say that more important than the French impact, which I said that there was a French impact, not a French impact, an impact of ideas that came from the new left somewhere into Matzpen. More important was the impact of a hidden tradition also of Israeli or Palestinian communism,
Yes.
from the when Akiva O and Moshe Machover, when they started, they read Josef Berger and Leopold Trepper, the people who came from Eastern Europe and became founders of the of the Communist Party here, and also the generation of Trotskyites, I mentioned Jakob Taut and Japan Nicola, who were on the one hand they gave Matzpen on the one hand ideas, and on the other hand there was of course this whole time of it was before the end of socialist utopias, which enabled a lot of criticism and important criticism.
This gentleman right here, and then we'll go to the back. Yes, first over here, and then we have two questions over there. So,
Thank you. Well, I'm actually a former colleague of Moshe Machover, because I was teaching at London University between 1965 and 1970. At first, I was the only person in a little department apart from the head of the department, and then the third person who came to join us was, in fact, Moshe Machover. So for a couple of years, I knew him. He and his wife, very nice people, very kind people, I would say, too. Unlike some kind of left-wing revolutionaries. I mean, really nice people to be with. And we didn't speak much about politics, but much more about philosophy of mathematics and logic and so on. And I wish he'd spent more of his life on that. But anyway, when I came here in 1970, I think the impact of Matzpen was already waning. There were other movements, like the ones developed to Shelley and so on. By the way, a lot of whose members were sitting in the library and the offices of the Van Leer Foundation, as it was then called. But I think two things really brought about the waning of this influence. The first was the Six-Day War itself, because before the war they could theorize about a socialist Middle East and all the rest of it without actually meeting anyone else in the Middle East. After the Six-Day War, first of all, there was the Khartoum Conference, with its 3 no's. But also, Israeli intellectuals started meeting Palestinian intellectuals all over the West Bank and so on, Jerusalem, and found that they could have all kinds of nice conversations about history of Islam or whatever. But when it came to the existence of Israel or even the Jewish population, it was total hostility. It was simply they met. There's a very interesting memoir by Menachem Milson, which he published a few months ago, describing exactly this, all the very fine conversations he had with people. But when it came to the existence of a Jewish state here, total hostility. The second thing which led to it was, in fact, that the big problem, the big issue in Israel in the 1970s was the issue of the Sephardi population and its demands for equality, the Black Panther movement, for example. Now, the Sephardi population was the least possible audience for a movement like Matzpen, because they knew very well what kind of life they'd had in Arab countries, and they found, and the vision of Matzpen was them completely unrealistic. Of course, I would just say finally, Israel largely solved the problem of the Sephardi population. I mean, in the meantime, we had the Sephardi head of the Histadrut, the Sephardi chief of staff, the Sephardi president, and so on. And then, of course, the Shas party, and of course, the Likud party it was very strongly supported by the Sephardis. And then after the peace treaty with Egypt, of course, things took another direction. So I think, the great time of Matzpen was actually in the 60s, before the Six-Day War, and afterwards the reality changed.
I wouldn't. Thank you very much. Like a lot of very interesting points, but I would disagree in a lot of points, because I think it's not true that the heydays of Matzpen were before Six-Day War. I would say before Six-Day War was a time when Matzpen developed most of its ideas and its critique, and the whole idea about, and I think it's important to highlight this, or to stress this point, the whole idea about this conflict as a national conflict with a colonial nature, a conflict between two national groups, but between a group that came from Europe mostly and on native residents like the Palestinian Arabs. This all evolved before, and very much, as I've said it in my lecture, against the background of or due to the influence of Jabra Nicola and Yaakov Taut, and also because of the Algerian War, and you could find this like within the newspapers of Matzpen. So the other thing is, like the question that you mentioned about meetings with Palestinians or leftists from the Arab world. Also here I would say it the other way around. first, I would say there was no need for Matzpen to accept from anyone from the Arab world to accept the Jewish state. Why? Because this was not like Matzpen already said that it would be wrong to expect the Jewish state from the Arab world.
Let's just keep, we have so many other comments that I would like to just terminate this with all due respect, do you want to say anything more?
I have to
Just continue.
I have to continue this because because it's important, and I rather would say that Matzpen had a major importance for, and you could see it also in the movie Eran made, where there's an interview with Khalil Hindi from the Democratic People's Front. Matzpen had a major importance in a theoretical debate of trying to explain that Israeli Jews are not simply part of Jewish religion, but they evolved something new, a new national group. And this was the idea, what Matzpen expected from the side of Palestinians and also from leftists from the Arab world. And I would say against this background, there evolved a lot of very fruitful debates up to the point, and I will not go into this now, up to the point, like on the one hand with Palestinian Arabs or Palestinians, on the one hand with Arabs with leftists from all over the Arab world, which concluded also in the journal Khamsin.
Okay, the lady in the back, and then Dominique, okay? Can you get the microphone back there too, so that we can record this for posterity?
Hi, thank you. I'll try to keep it short. I want to ask something, and I hope it wouldn't be perceived as provocative. Was Matzpen really marginal? Sure, on the level of their positions, then yes. But if we consider their sociological background, then Matzpen were what Baruch Kimmerlin called the Achusalim, Ashkenazi, secular, and so on. So how? So what was really? Why is there really a basis for this assumption that Matzpen was marginal? And also, I would like to hear perhaps from Celia the comparison to the 68ers. Were they also the best of our youth, and whether they were treated differently?
All right, so first you and then Celia.
Concerning the social background, I'm not that sure. I have no, it's true that Matzpen, like most of the Matzpen of the original group came from a university background and was not that marginal, like it's part of society. This marginality comes from the political vision, and I would say this remained all the time the same. That they were, Matzpen was a group that really wanted to change something, and this marginality comes from evolved from the idea of changing the political situation and to somehow abandon the idea of Jewish state. I would say this is something which turned them into totally marginal.
Celia.
Actually, I would say there are some parallels because the 68ers, of course, if you think about society and everything, and you want to produce ideas, you have to read a lot, you have to write a lot, and this is usually only possible in life of a small elite. So, of course, it was in France and in Germany, small groups of political activists at universities that had time to think about these things. So it's actually an elite phenomenon that was opened to others. And later, and for example, in the 70s with movements of immigrants, it spread a wider range of people. But the politicization, for example, of workers in France and Germany, in this sense, failed because they were close to the Communist Party, with a complete different political representation, with somebody who speaks for them, and not to speak for themselves.
Well, now, if you could pass the microphone to Dominique Bourrel. Dominique, you've got one.
Just a little question. Did you find any hints or allusions to Brit Shalom, Ichud? In other words, did they read Martin Buber, Bergman, Scholem, and so weiter?
Well, I didn't. Well, let's say it like this. When I started my research, I met Chaim Hanekbi, one of the founders, and it was a time when I, by myself, dealt with Brit Shalom, and I told him about it, and he said, wow, it's interesting, I've never heard about it. So I wouldn't say that there's an impact, also for several reasons. And I obviously can't say this for every...
Please,
and I obviously can't say this for everyone because I also focused on several persons and on several events, but I wouldn't say that this was the major impact. I wouldn't say, because they were from totally different backgrounds. So I would say, no, there's no major impact of the idea of binational Zionism on Matzpen, I would say. Maybe I'm wrong, but I wouldn't say that there's a major impact. There was a conflict and you had to solve it. So.
No, but that continues what the first gentleman said, namely that you have a movement, certain Zionism or any form of nationalism keeps creating the same kind or similar kinds of opposition. So in one generation it's Brit Shalom, and in the next generation it's Matzpen, and these are not the same. They're very different in their roots and in their aims, but they have the same structural relation to the main movement. Splintered. But productive splinter. Yes.
Maybe I can go back just one
Right.
comment, one more comment. It would be interesting because I mentioned this group in the 40s, Revolutionary Communist League. It was at the margins of communism in Palestine. But it would be interesting because they published a pamphlet against founding a Jewish state, whether they had contacts with Ichud, and one of their members was later Gabriel Bear, who was later in the Hebrew University. I have no idea. I've never found something, but it would be interesting.
Yes. Well, we're waiting for more comments. Yes, sir.
I have a comment to what you just said,
Okay.
Please.
because I think you did a bit of Eisenstadt on the movement. That is, you've already theorized
That's
a
right.
particular case into being a cycle in secularizations, and each one will be different. So you've done a containment movement on Matzpen.
I wish I were that skillful. I do think, however, that the paradoxes of Jewish nationalism do not go away, and so that the people who in some way find Jewish nationalism uncanny will react in analogous ways over time. That's all I'm saying. That the problems remain. And the problem was seen by Brit Shalom, and the problem was seen by Matzpen. Now, these were very different kinds of reaction. Anyway, I accept that. Yes, over here, you wanted to say something.
I am a member of one of the small groups in the left, in the new left in Israel, and I was interested with the idea of the death of utopian ideology. And I feel the same inside my movement. And I find that we deal very much with critics of the actual politics, but we have no basis, no future. And we leave the field to messianic nationalistic ideology, and this is why our problem.
The Nachon.
Which movement?
I'm not sure that other members will feel the same, but
Yes, Celia.
Yeah, thank you very much. I understand you, Nachon Meod, but I want to make a small differentiation, because usually today when people speak about left utopianism or left utopian views, usually they make the link between utopia and orthodox communist views. And I want to recall here that there were different types of utopian views, anarchist, socialist, but the problem is that this anti-communist, that utopia is connected with the communist experience, and thus has been delegitimized. Unfortunately, also other forms, like for example, anticipating future in the present, like situationists, situationists, yes. It's also something that is almost forgotten today as a tradition of protest. But thank you very much for your...
I would react on this and would say that as socialism evolved from ideas of enlightenment, there is still there's still the continuity of enlightenment necessary, and all the ideas that were somehow part of a socialist utopia of equality and also of mutual recognition still needs to be newly formulated also after the death of utopia. And I would say also, although there is no hope for socialist revolution in the Middle East, and unfortunately we are facing totally the opposite, I would say if one would revive the ideas of enlightenment, of equality, then it also gives new perspectives for political change, because they are still valuable. No, also there's in the end, if conflicts continue, then one has to deal somehow with it. So it's.
I don't think utopia is dead at all, but it's
the feeling that the only group who was very clear about it was Matzpen. I had the feeling when I came to a first meeting of Matzpen that I am for the first time in Israel with normal people. Really, that's the first element. Second, I will sound ridiculous, but we were not inspired by Buber. What I was reading in this time, and I was even ashamed of it, it was the little red book of Mao Zedong, which had much more influence on me than Buber, but today I would read with much more interest. The third thing, the difference with Europe, I think is also sociologically interesting, that when a lot of people who were leftists in Europe had after wonderful careers, especially in France. Even Cohn-Bendit has a very beautiful career. Other got prime ministers, other got very important inside Matzpen, and I think is the beauty of it. When you were inside, it was finished with the Israeli establishment. That means if you would not, if you make a mea culpa, but most of the people, in a way or another, agree with the ideas what they had 20 or 30 years ago. And at this time, if you were in this kind of group, it was finished. There was a split, something for all your life. I don't say it's good, I don't say it's bad, but it's a fact. And the last thing which I would stress, which is a little partial, your work, very interesting, is very influenced by Matzpen in Tel Aviv. Which is, but you had in our group, I don't want to say it's better, it's worse, but we had a few interesting things. We were very active with the Black Panthers. Mm-hmm. We were very active with Palestinians in the West Bank, like Salim Tamari and like Hanan Ashrawi in a time. I remember we went to Ramallah and we were giving leaflets. And also this intellectual, I speak especially about Salim Tamari, were very much for the recognition of a kind of Israeli state. That means the idea, which was important for Matzpen, that the Arab side should recognize the right of self-determination of the Israeli. So I had not the feeling when I had meetings with Palestinians and also with people of the Democratic Front in France in the 70s, that these people were so opposed to the idea of another Israeli state. But it went another way.
Okay. I was a member of the Communist Party during all the 60s. And just to remind you, there was the discussion about the nature of Israel as a state, as a Jewish state, inside the Communist Party, and it was split in 1965. Yeah, that's one comment. Secondly, I asked whether at the late 60s and the beginning 70s, Matzpen was the only left wing movement, the new left-wing movement in Israel, I would rather say it was a minor, and it was a greater new left movement here, which was called the New Israeli Left, Siach, yes. And so I think that the emphasis of the, let's say, the importance of Matzpen on the Israeli politics is a little bit exaggerated.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's very interesting because I also asked myself how to relate to Seir or to Rakach, and obviously it's true that Matzpen was not in the late 60s not the only group that was against the occupation, and that's why Matzpen also once supported to vote for Rakach, because they spoke out against the occupation, and obviously also Seir. But I would say that Matzpen was the only group after 67 that said, well, it's good, it's important to be against occupation, and it's obvious that it brought a lot of people to Matzpen, but Matzpen was the only group that said, but that's not the beginning of the conflict. And I would say, interestingly, there is also like a kind of overlapping with the with right-wing groups, because this was also said by people who argued for occupation or annexation of the territories, like Begin said it, or also like there's an article by Motzkin who said that even the right said, like, if we want to continue like occupation or annexation, then that's something similar to a process that started already long before the foundation of the state. And so I would say Matzpen was against occupation and said, well, but occupation is not the beginning of the conflict, as also obviously all the Palestinian organizations said at this time.
Matzpen wasn't a protest movement.
Sorry?
We have a microphone over here.
No, I just said that. Matzpen was not a protest movement. It was much more than protest, like Sia. Sia was a protest movement. Matzpen was not.
Okay, so just for the mic, comment was that Matzpen was not a protest movement. So now that's recorded. Yes, sir. You have to push that button.
All right. Well, I was also a member of Matzpen, not from the beginning. I would like to speak about two points that were not highlighted here enough, or maybe almost not at all. First of all is Matzpen had Arab members almost all the time, and so we worked together with, there was no difference in membership, and it is a different thing than saying in Europe, because we had, this was, for the Arab members, it was more difficult to join Matzpen. It seems very, maybe, to think that it would be easier, but it was more difficult for them. First of all, because Arab members were more under danger of the security services. Second, inside the Arab society, to become secular and work with people from the, after all, from the colonial society. So it's almost also changing, it seems changing sides. And it was more difficult for Arabs to be in Matzpen. Anyway, but it was a thing that, we worked together for all these years. And this is not what, you cannot equate it with the situation of left revolutionary groups in Europe, because this was a colonial issue here, and you had people from the colonial society and people from the colonized society working together. So that was one thing. And then if you talk about sociological, so we were, of course, the Arabs were also not from the mainstream of their society, and we were also outsiders in our society. The second thing is that for me, I joined after 71, 72, And I remember that we were under the, for me it was the legendary people who were talked about. One of them died just 3 days ago. Jalal Sadek al-Azem was an intellectual, a Syrian intellectual and left-wing, and he wrote after 67 war, he wrote a path-breaking book about criticizing the Arab movements, which, in his opinion, led to the loss in the war of 67. And later, a year later, he wrote criticism of the religious thinking, and which led him to a lot of problems in the Arab world. And at the end of 1971, I went to Europe and I met him in London. So for me, I just was maybe 1 year after leaving the army, and I'm sitting in a place in Moshe Machover's apartment in London, meeting this, for me, legendary person from Syria. When, you have to remember, we have Israel has peace with Egypt, not with Syria yet, but at that time, Syrians were, the enemies, the arch enemies of. And I was sitting. It was very short time after the people of Udi Adiv and Daoud Turki, the people were arrested, and here I was sitting with him, and what was amazing for me that he was interested in talking to me more than he wanted to hear from me more than and they didn't want to speak so much. He was so curious to hear from me about what does it mean to grow up as an Israeli, to be an Israeli soldier. He was interested in all these questions. Then the other person who was also legendary when I met him later was Afif al-Akhdar, who was a revolutionary Arab revolutionary from Tunisia, who was also for a time took part with the Democratic Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And I met him also this time it was in Paris, in the apartment of Eli Lebel, which was already, he killed himself a little time before that. But anyway, here I met another legendary figure of the Arab left. So it was not, the idea was that how the ice between Israelis and Arabs broke down so easily, and you could meet people from Arab countries and talk like we were comrades. Now, another thing that was reminded that about the Oriental Jews in Israel, the Black Panthers. So we were all part of, we took part in the demonstrations. And in fact, I remember very well the May 1st, 1972 demonstration in the center of Jerusalem. The first time that the Black Panthers took part in a May Day demonstration with the left, and just to remember about it, it was thousands of people in the center of Jerusalem, mostly Oriental Jews, with people of the left, including Matzpen and so on, and then and we met again an hour later in the cells of the police after being arrested together with them, and so. Yeah, okay.
It was a meeting between people of Matzpen and the leaders of the Black Panther that started the movement. And this is something very important for us to remember.
All right.
By the way, I'm also part of it.
And the last.
It happened in Jerusalem. It actually happened with Matzpen people.
All right. Never mind. We'll not join. Okay. The last point I want to tell you, okay, we were socialists, but not only that. You mentioned the fact that we were against the Istadrut, right? But it means, to be a member of Matzpen or any of the all the groups of Matzpen, part of it was, to go to wake up in 5 or 6 in the morning and go to the factories and give out leaflets. And when there were strikes, to come and support the strikers. And there I discovered that when you speak to workers, the first time I thought we had to tell them how they were exploited. So they knew it very well. They told us. And when they had, when there was the great antagonism between workers and the state, and at that time, strikers were talked about as Fatah. It was for we came there. There was no antagonism with us. They wanted to hear what we had to say. Of course, they forgot afterwards because there were other problems. But it was not that we came to workers and got on the head with stones. All right.
You want to say something to that?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Toda Rabba, because you mentioned so many things that were so important and also that were very important for me in writing this book. So I said in the beginning that I wrote a chapter about Khamsin, which I, about the journal that came out of these meetings between Matzpen members and Sadiq Al-Azm and Lafif Lahda, and there's a third person which needs to be highlighted here, and this is Leila Qadi. She was actually the first one from the Arab radical left from Lebanon that get in contact, as far as I know, with Matzpen members in '69 when she started to discuss with Moshe Machova and wrote to him, here, I want to write a book about Matzpen. And she wrote, I remember the sentence in the book, in the letter where she wrote, and this may help to make the radical Israeli left somehow kosher for Fatah. So she published a book at the Palestine Research Center, and she was also the editor together with Eli Loebel of Khamsin. So I really, this was something extremely important for me because I found it was so important that there was a possibility for leftists from all over the region to meet, to discuss things. And and I'm shocked. I didn't know that Sadiq Al-Azm died. And I want to say another thing, or two more things, that I very much in the book dealt with the question of the Histadrut, because it was, as far as I see, and as also one can read in an interview with Moshe Machova, the struggle against the structure of the Histadrut or the Histadrut itself was maybe the first political program of Matzpen, and and it goes back obviously to the participation of Akiva Or in the Siemens strike in '51, and the other thing is also what you said is, and I try to stress this fact very much. That Matzpen was a group where Israeli Jews and Palestinians worked together on an equal, on the basis of equality is one of the most important things. And obviously, the one who, when I spoke to him and also in other interviews, stressed this a lot was Khalil Touame, because he was was very early also a member of Matzpen and also had to feel like the oppression of the state immediately after the 6-Day War, yes, which led to the first international campaign, so to say, of Matzpen.
Did you want to say something?
I want to add only one episode, which maybe will show that it was a surprise for me too, how the influence of Matzpen on Arab left was maybe not, it may be more important than it was the influence of Matzpen in Israel. The influence of Matzpen on the Arab left was... I think about 15 years ago, I was in an international human rights conference in Canada. And of course, after in the evening, we were talking, it was very easy that I found myself with a few Arabs who were also there, and they were interested about what goes on in Israel and so on. And we had also some people around who are not from the area. And we ate together dinner, and then we left, going back to the dormitories where we slept. And there were two Egyptians who started walking slowly with me to let the other group go forward. And then they said, you mentioned that something about Matzpen. You were a member of Matzpen? I said, yes. Oh, very good. Just tell me, what was the reasons of the split between you and Mavak?
That's very good.
And a few weeks later, you know, we looked at Egyptian TV, and there was discussion there, and I saw him around the table. All right, so.
Okay. Yes, Uri, there's another comment here? Leer, yes. Can you get a microphone over to her? I'm sorry, my spirit's
just
gone.
very briefly, I would say, I think that the uniqueness of Matzpen could not be replaced and will not be able to will not be replaced ever. Because we can see nowadays streams or organizations or people or articles that are supporting the Palestinians, that are feeling sorry for the Palestinians and see the future and are against our attitude towards them, etc., etc. But the only group, I think, and I feel it, and I'm living among Palestinians all the time, the only group that could see a common future was Matzpen because of the politics, because of the common, with those who spoke about socialism, we could speak together. With those who thought like us, generally, not even in specific lines, generally we could live with. This was a real promise for a common future. I had it with so many people. I don't think we hardly have it today. So this promise should be fulfilled. That's why it was important.
Okay, any more? Going once, going twice? Yes, sir.
Just a short. One of the influences of Matzpen was the impact that it had on the understanding of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict abroad. And 68 was very crucial in that respect, right? The ability, because Moshe Machover went in 68 to live in London, and so was Akiva O, and so many other people. Danny was in Berlin, and other people were in different places. And we acted as an international to introduce to the new left in Europe concepts of the conflict, which nowadays are becoming, if you want, BDS, whatever. And from how the Israeli government reacts today, you can get a little bit of the feeling of what it was to ostracize Matzpen and what a threat Matzpen was, despite of the fact that it had very few members.
I just want to react shortly because I think it's very important what you said, and it's true, and I think it's very interesting also to see Israeli press at the time, how harshly the press reacted to everything that Matzpen members did abroad, to be it being with Palestinians in demonstrations in London, or the appearance of Eli Lobel in Frankfurt, in opposition to Asher Ben Natan, the Israeli ambassador, or be it, which is on the margins of Matzpen again, be it the publication of Israeli news by Shimon Tzabar. I think you are totally right, and it's an important aspect that needs to be emphasized, and I try to do it.
Any more? Yes.
Well, two things. First of all,
Microphone.
Two statements of fact. First of all, is this on?
It's not on.
It's not. You can turn it on. Okay. Yeah, first of all, Matzpen was not the only Israeli political group that had Arab members. MAPAM, I think, had far more Arab members in it, and also did, in practical terms, far more for Arabs than Matzpen ever could. And secondly, it's not correct that Matzpen was the only group that advocated abandoning the occupation. I mean, even Ben-Gurion famously said after the Six-Day War, we only have to keep Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, and all the rest we can give away. So, Ben-Gurion, it's a very famous statement, which in the meantime people, at the time very well known, but in the meantime people have turned in saying he wanted to abandon. But also many other groups saw that, I mean, the difficulties of maintaining the occupation. The problem was simply what do you do about it? I mean, with the total opposition from the Arab countries, from the PLO, which issued a new manifesto, which was far more aggressive than the original one, and so on. The question is, how can you can you give these territories to, and how can you prevent another war from breaking out as soon as you do so?
Okay. I want to say one thing about that. I think that if we are going to study Matzpen or any movement like that, we have to make an internal shift and not look at it from the paradigm of Zionism or the interests of the state of Israel. Those may be legitimate or not, depending on your point of view, but it makes no sense to study a dissident movement from some kind of other paradigm and then try to find out what happened in it. The whole point about Matzpen was that it wanted to break with the Zionist paradigm. It was not interested particularly in the security of the state of Israel. It was interested in finding a common society with the Palestinians. Now that may be utopian, it may be realistic, but the phenomenon itself requires a sort of independent study, quite apart from our judgment of the realizability of their program. And I think this is what Lutz Fiedler has done in his book, and I'm very glad, and I will hope I can contribute a little, because I also think it needs to be translated into Hebrew, and so that some of us will be able to read it and then give our more learned opinions on the actual text. So with that, thank you all. Thank you very much, and till next time.